And this is not a hallucination on my part.
Some issues and questions to ask. So I'm asking about if we could have a committee. I think we call them subcommittees.
That's what I would prefer, because I have no interest in serving on a committee.
It's not a hallucination.
No interest in serving on a committee. No interest, because I have no interest.
You know, it's obviously a major deal for the city. Major deal for the city.
No interest.
Major deal for the city. And I know that it's been, at least staff has had the issue in front of them for some time. At least staff has had the issue in front of them for some time. At least staff is for some time.
It's not a hallucination. And this is not a hallucination on my part.
I have some big concerns about the environmental, and I have some concerns about traffic still that weren't answered during Monday, and were not flushed through during Planning and Zoning Commission. And I think if we have one subcommittee meeting, I think we can at least flush out all of our concerns. They can come back to us whether the HEB wants to comply or not. At least we've been able to flush that out in a really good discussion, as opposed from, I don't want to do it from up here where I don't get to have that conversation and have questions and answers.
Because I have no interest in serving on a committee.
It's not something that could be addressed between now and Tuesday.
Probably not.
Having a meeting set up with the officials of HEB to answer the questions.
I actually didn't expect it to be on our agenda this quickly.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to have a little bit more time. I know it can happen from P&Z to ours, but I wasn't expecting it. So.
And this is not a hallucination on my part. This is stuff from figures from USGS websites, and then I checked with USGS about my ratio concept to compare floods and different drainages, and they said that I was correct in the way that I portrayed this.
Because I have no interest in serving on a committee. Because I have no interest in serving on a committee.
So what I'm pointing out, the bottom line is that we could have floods here that are twice the one we had in 2015. And that's happened in areas around us. We live in a very unusual place, as I've told you hundreds of times before. We have rainfall events comparable to Bangladesh. We live in a very unusual place, as I've told you hundreds of times before. We have rainfall events comparable to Bangladesh, as I've told you hundreds of times, as I've told you hundreds of times, as I've told you hundreds of times.
No interest in serving on a committee.
At least staff has had the issue in front of them.
As I've told you hundreds of times. I took time yesterday or Monday to explain to the HEB folks that they need to raise their building. They need to raise their building.
No interest in serving on a committee.
At least staff has had the issue in front of them.
They need to raise their building because it is going to flood. It is going to flood. It is going to flood.
At least staff has had the issue in front of them.
It is going to flood if it is built just to the standards that are currently proposed. And you need to think about the people downstream when they do raise the building and what that's going to mean.
Then, of course, when we build in Flash Flood Alley, we see exemplar scenarios like Float Home Capes Camp.
Now, I realize we're talking about a 2D model being implemented, which is great, and staying out of the 100-year floodplain, which is great, and that may be all that you can do in the planning department with the rules that you have to operate under.
Right? And so I think it's really hilarious that we have all these developments, but we don't have 2D modeling on the table when it hits the P&Z. Is there something called 3D modeling? If there is, I would suggest that that would be the standard.
But I want you all to understand that we are going to have floods. We have already had floods much worse than 100-year floods, and we are going to have twice the flood that we had in 2015 someday when the rainfall happens to hit in that watershed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Finally, I'm very concerned about building in close proximity of caves. I'm worried about sinkholes, especially by Carve's features. And according to the National Geographic in August of 2013, we also introduce sinkholes when we start putting up parking lots and buildings and changing what we call hydraulic regime. This is all within the context of research of Carve's features. Instead, the water naturally soaking into the ground, it creates a runoff being concentrated to the ground at one point.
We're going to have twice the flood that we had in 2015.
Please allow me to offer you visual aid number 1. We are in a flood zone. This is what we call purgatory hell. See, guys, look, the water is all the way up to the bridge. And look, this is underwater, people. It's called a flood zone.